First up will be the construction defects and the owner-occupied attached housing ordinance discussion. Deputy City Manager, Mr. Broughton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, City Council. In your packet, I included a number of items, a few articles from the Denver Post, the Denver Business Journal, as well as the ordinances from the City of Lakewood and the City of Parker on this issue. I think most of you are knowledgeable on the issue of construction. Basically, in Colorado, we have law in place that makes it easier, I guess, it would be a way for a builder to get sued for any defect within a multifamily for sale unit, whether it be a condo or a townhouse. And so generally builders avoid the risk by not building townhouses and condos in Colorado, and we've seen that in recent years, and what you've approved in recent years has been all apartments, if you'll recall, pretty much all apartments. I'll skip right to the Lakewood ordinance. What the City of Lakewood did is they passed an ordinance basically with two primary objectives. It gives the builder a right to repair, so if there is a defect, instead of immediately going to the homeowners association going to a claim, it gives the builder the option to repair that defect, whatever it may be. And second, currently the law basically requires that the homeowners association board make the vote to approve going to sue a builder, and what the ordinance that Lakewood passed allows for is the majority of the members of the homeowners association have to approve the lawsuit. And so it requires informed consent of the individuals who own those units. And then the other one, the town of Parker, they put on any multifamily property a voluntary plat note. The issue with basically the plat note that's put on any property that's subdivided at a certain level or something, it mandates binding arbitration for any construction defects claims. The issue with the plat note is if the legislature were to address construction defects, then you have to go back through those plats and revise those items. It's not very appealing. So a few pros that I'll cite a few pros and cons that were cited in the Lakewood example and what some on both sides have said. It's for the pro side, it's a local action, defines a local process to address defects, gives more authority to those in an HOA rather than just the board, and can avoid lengthy, costly lawsuits. On the other side, Lakewood's likely to get sued because of it. So it doesn't necessarily avoid, it shifts that lawsuit to a different place. Moving forward with something like this would acknowledge a need for diverse housing stock. It may reduce the risk and spur owner-occupied development activity. Moving forward with an ordinance could support Lakewood and Parker and other cities that have attempted to address this locally, and it could spur discussion at the state level, and we've seen that already with Lakewood's action. That the Denver Post is editorialized in favor of doing something. We're seeing discussions already in the legislature, so I think that's folks who are now in the legislature, it's a positive thing. The cons, there's questionable authority to address this under home rule powers. It's a statewide issue that some people feel should not be addressed locally. There was a Lakewood council member who's a former legislator who gave her comments when she voted on it. Appearance of a pro-builder rather than a consumer protection mentality gives the right to cure to a builder who caused a defect in the first place. So some people may care not to have that builder make the fix. And again, likely to be challenged in court. There have been some comments in the media of it's not a matter of if, but when. And of course, there needs to be first standing to sue. So what we're recommending, or what staff is recommending to move forward with, is unless there's a disagreement from council, we would rather see a resolution move forward than basically encouraging the legislature to take it up. I think there's a pretty likely chance that this will be addressed to the legislature, and addressing something locally could have other issues associated with it. So that staff's recommendation, we'd be happy to discuss. So.
Councilmember Smallman?
Mike, did the Parker ordinance come before or after Lakewood?
It came after Lakewood by about a week or two.
They were aware of Lakewood before.
Correct.
They say why they wanted to do something after Lakewood, so let the genie out of the bottle?
That I don't know.
Okay. If Lakewood gets sued, what are the likely damages?
Yeah.
Just, you get to go ahead.
Yeah, you would go around what they have for an
But
ordinance.
you wouldn't anticipate monetary damages, other than it cost them the time to defend.
Yeah, that'd be my assumption.
Okay. And I mean, when you guys talk to CML, I don't know. I like the theory that Lakewood has now raised the bar from a visibility standpoint such that the legislature will actually do something. Based on some of the conversations we had, for example, Councilmember Brinkman and I and former Councilmember Taylor went down and talked to our elected representatives.
I was with you.
Oh, yeah, that's right, you were. Sorry, I forgot about that. My apologies. You're right. Yeah, but I mean, I
I remember that you.
wouldn't say we got excessive traction with our arguments.
Sure. Well, and also remember, that was a different time. You've got a split House with a Senate now controlled by Republicans and the House by Democrats. And
Trial attorneys are still writing checks, so I'm not sure it's all that different.
that's true. However, the president of the Senate now is no longer a trial attorney.
Well, that's fair.
So that could help at least move some things along.
Okay, I thanks.
But I understand entirely what you're saying as well.
Council. Bruce?
Michael, Councilman Stallman started to talk about the CML, and I want to continue that discussion a little bit. Is there a chance that whatever CML's position would be, and we know it would be in favor of fixing this train wreck, that in somewhere there they might have a model path for a city to follow, and they might make a suggestion, perhaps favoring a resolution or not, and leaving it open, or just where do you think CML would go? I really feel that with the lack of response that this thing's had for about a half a dozen years,
Sure.
that it's time to have a unified front presented by municipalities going into this next one, and I'm wondering if CML is going to go that way.
And I wasn't involved in the policy discussion. Michael, do you want to know what was said at the policy discussion?
I think the answer is there's interest at CML to move it forward, and Councilman Brinkman is on the board of the executive board, so she may actually know the most current. But I think from a summary standpoint is the whole issue of the local municipalities taking some type of action wasn't that was going to cause for sale multi-unit apartments to magically appear in our community. It was always about getting the legislature cognizant of the pent-up demands that municipalities have had and the desire to take action. And we believe that primarily Lakewood has led that charge. The Parker one we're not as keen on, and I'm not sure it has the ramifications of what we've seen, but because we now believe that the legislature, now that the election's over, and we know that CML wants to move this forward from a policy standpoint, and that, as Mike pointed out a moment ago, there's an opportunity for it at the State House. That message has been sent, and now it's working through our lobbyist, CML, to make that unified voice and determine what is it that we want to see happen, because I don't think anybody believes, Lakewood included, that they're magically going to get any for-sale units being built in Lakewood. We don't believe no developer is going to take the risk based upon a local ordinance versus the current state statute to take that risk. If we did, and we believe that it wasn't about a lawsuit, but that it would actually cause some development, then I think you'd see it popping up all over. But it's not. It's about we believe it's about a statement to the legislature, which has now been made.
Deb, did you want to?
The board meets next week, and we'll be discussing
How's
it.
that for timing?
But I was at the Arvada district meeting, and they talked about it there, and not Jeff, the other one,
Kevin?
the other attorney, no.
Mark, Kevin?
Mark was kind of addressing the different issues and getting feedback from the room, and he asked if anybody in the room was planning on doing similar to what Lakewood did. And there were a couple of people that were really intrigued with what Lakewood did, and they were kind of cheerleading them, but there was kind of an overall feeling that they were very much mavericks in this, and that really isn't how CML operates. They also felt that there was a level of risk that a lot of the other cities weren't that comfortable with. So there was in the room probably close to maybe 15 to 20 cities represented, and no one said that they were going to follow what Lakewood was doing. I think CML's position will be, and I'll correct this next week after the meeting if it's wrong, or update it for you, but it will probably be what it tends to be, and that is to get as fair a law on the books as they possibly can that keeps, that supports cities and supports the correction in the law, which is what's denying it. I know that in the past the deal has been trying to work through those differences, and one of those huge differences is part of what Lakewood did, and it's the right to cure. And that's the problem that the builders really have with it, because they want the right to come in and cure. And so it's not as though the whole thing has to go away. There still is a protection level, but the CML is really, I think, going to be looking more in terms of how do we find that place that can get more support and still give the builders a comfort level that they can go in there and do this. And of course, you'll get the better builders actually at that point. So that's kind of that summary. And like I said, if that changes after the meeting, then I'll update you guys. Personally, I love what Lakewood did, and I love that they stood up and screamed and shouted and said no, and we're going to do something different. We're tired of this. And Murphy's been screaming it at Metro Mayors for a long time, and there is support for this to change. And I would love to be that second maverick and run something up the flagpole and see what happens. But I've thought about it a bit, and I do think that it kind of trying to work with the group and show a strong unity with that and moving it forward and hopefully being able to present a better option for there to be more acceptance at the legislature is probably a smarter choice.
Yeah. I'm going to weigh in on this. Just, I'm supportive of, or would like us to consider a sentiment to see a resolution. One, it would send a message to our legislators that indeed this is important, and as we've seen sometimes messages get garbled. When we think we've had conversations with them, it doesn't seem to go through. My understanding is Senator Ulibarri is going to represent what was put on the agenda for the Senate last year, but was very adeptly scheduled to see 3 committees before, and it was impossible to move through the legislature in that last week. And I think if we took a position on a resolution that says diversity in housing is important, multifamily ownership, owner-occupied attached housing is something that we would like to see in our mix. We have definitely been in a position where we've seen the challenges in addressing that with projects or at least rezonings that have come before us, and would definitely be supportive of the legislature taking on something and get that through in December so it can get on the legislative agenda early in the 2015 session. I think there is a different sentiment in the legislature. If there would have been something else as far as the change in the President and the Senate, I might have argued a little bit more in taking a more activist potential. Not that I would go there easily, but I think a resolution from our council that says, hey, we're going to cheer this on and we're going to pay attention to it, and we're going to certainly talk with our legislators as to how important it is, but it's something that we can send off to them to say, hey, we're in this and would like to see us consider that.
What's Metro Mayor's doing? Anything?
We haven't had a regular meeting since both Bob and Mike Bob Murphy and Mike Quaid. Bob's from Lakewood and Mike is from Parker. Have done that, although they both put us on notice that it was coming at the Metro Mayors. And Bob circulated the legislation or the ordinance component that they had, and that has been one of the things that staff has had in their pocket to review, is what did go forward in Lakewood. My hope at this point in time is that a few little nudges is all that's going to be needed to actually have this taken up by the legislature next year. But because it has been a multi-year issue to get it onto the legislative docket for the state, I think being in a position to kind of put that little nudge without putting us at any particular risk as far as a plat approach that I think has a risk element in Parker. And I think if something is taken up in the legislature, at least my conversations with Bob is you may see the ordinance change in Lakewood if it actually gets through the state before they get exposed on that. But I think this is it's a very important issue, and I know that we've received a lot of citizen comments about how come so many apartments and why not for ownership, and I think they don't quite understand it, so at least gives us an opportunity to discuss that and support it. Other comments? Deb?
One other quick thing. I did get an email from, one moment please, and the reason I want to share this in part is because Nick Bacone, he is the government affairs consultant for the South Metro Realtors Association. He is he indicates that they're very interested in and committed to being involved in this type of legislature. So I think see interest in the item on the study session tonight, construction defects. We are interested. We intend on being engaged should the item move forward. So I think that kind of got me thinking that, we can build a little bit more of an army and bring in some of the, like the Realtors Associations are very powerful, and it's not just the municipalities that are fighting these lawyers, right? And so it can become maybe, and that's something I think that we'll work with, with CML as we go forward, but trying to build a stronger case and a little bit more diversified too, and not just having, grumpy cities. But I would say on this recommendation to staff, if we do move forward with this, I want the language to be really, really strong. I don't want there to be any doubt what we intend with this. I think the stronger the language, the more they will at least look at it and read it, and it will have a little bit, hopefully a little bit more impact on the importance that it is.
And within that strong language, we're not looking to run roughshod over the consumer side of it, but there are additional remedies. And if you look at Ulibarri's proposal, it does not preclude the Homeowners Association from going to a class action. It says, though, that both sides of the consumers need to be aware of what is happening, both those interested in moving forward in some sort of suit against the construction side of it, but also that property owners within that homeowners association know they may be encumbered on that suit. And the current approach is one of those where they can unknowingly be caught into that, and their property is then encumbered for 3 or 4 years for the lawsuit to be processed. So
Correct, and oftentimes they can't refinance, they can't sell.
Right.
So yeah, that's an issue.
Bruce.
I'll support the resolution, but I'll say this. I think ordinances sometimes carry more weight than resolutions. And I really would prefer to support Lakewood and not leave them out on an island. So if our sentiment is to do a resolution, I'm all for that, but I'd be interested in being a little more mavericky.
You can always let that be known. Yes, Randy.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess I don't have a lot to add other than seems like for years I've been in a lot of meetings where this has been an absolute burning brightly topic between home builders associations. For the last few months I've attended the Dr. Cog Transit Alliance, and it was really, really a hot button. Very familiar with what happened with Senator Ulibarri's bill last year, and it was really tragic that had to happen. Hopefully it won't this year, but with the politics, I have some, I suppose I have some confidence that with the changing in the administration, for good or bad on both sides, that at least that one thing that happened last year with the president won't happen again. But I'm kind of like into a resolution 2.0, I think. I'm very supportive of that, but I echo Councilmember Stallman. I understand the risks at what Lakewood did. I really wanted to just stand up and cheer when I heard about that, and now that the press has come, I want to kind of go up and hug those guys and tell them that they've been very very brave by being innovative and out of the box, and making a real statement. And it's been pointed out to us by many people lately that the resolution may not have a lot of teeth. We've heard that for 2 or 3 months now in council, and so I guess I would maybe not want to go tilting at windmills with regard to, to mix metaphors, diving in with Lakewood, but I would like to try to see if we could find another mechanism that might be more supportive, if we could come up with one. I agree with you that the plat note may be problematic, and so maybe if there's another option that we could explore, that would be, I'm supportive of the resolution. But like you, I'd like to see if we could come up with something that might just be maybe more of an attaboy.
So I would suggest that another way to get involved in this is to get involved at CML, because that's where this is actually going to change. Passing an ordinance is not going to provide direction to the legislature. It's not, and Mike can speak to this much better than anyone in this room, that is not how the bills get fashioned. That is not how issues are resolved. They're in the Speaker's office with very specific language, and Mark Radke and us communicating with Mark Radke. And so, it's picking a rep, and we have a very capable rep who's on the executive board who can participate, or anybody else who wants to participate, and should call up Mark Radke and find out when the committee meetings are. And then when it gets to hearing, should get up there and testify in favor of it. I mean, that's what's going to cause the change. I appreciate the desire by the council to make a statement by an ordinance or resolution, but that's sitting on the sidelines and hooping and hollering. The way the bill will get passed and the language will get drafted will be through CML and other parties who will come together, because the trial lawyers will be involved, and they'll sit down and they'll hash it out. It will not affect, as I've told many of you, the statement by Lakewood made the statement. It shot across the bow, and the legislature is aware of it. Now we need to not wave and dance. We need to actually get in there and help the sausage get made.
Michael, you're right. This will be solved with the Speaker of the House, the President of the Senate, the governor's reps, and the lobbyists for the home builder and the lobbyists for the trial attorneys. They'll all be put in a room and be made to talk. It's usually how this would go down.
And I know that among this council, we were more than willing to step down to the State House and participate with that. It's at least one little piece of paper that folks might be able to wave to say, hey, it's not just me as an individual council member coming, but it is one of those things that, in effect, we've been hurt by the status quo.
Agreed. Well, and we went down last year to testify as well. So,
and then doing a resolution at this point in time doesn't preclude us from an ordinance later. Thank you.
Just
Sure.
the advantage of a resolution might be that whatever council members were to go down and testify would have a clearance to say the support of, they're representing a council, a totality of council. Not that that's going to make a difference in the end, but perhaps I think it makes them a stronger person. They're there truly representing. I think there's something to that.
Well, and if we're working for strong language, I mean, we can certainly be in a position that we as a city feel like our mix of housing with what is being constructed now has been restricted and hurt.
I believe your legislative policy statement also addresses this as well, so which you've adopted as well. So you already do have language on it supporting.
Yeah, we're within our range. Okay. Gone. Okay, you want to bring Kristen up?
Will do. Council, next up, you have a quick presentation from Kristen Cipher from C&B Designs. She is the consultant working on the plan, the signage and wayfinding plan for the Mary Carter Greenway Trail and the South Platte Park monument signage and entry signage there. So I'll be quick and hand it off to Kristen. We actually have the presentation up already, so we should be ready to go.
Thank you, guys. I apologize for arriving late tonight. The weather is bad. So on a cold night, we're going to talk about trails and being outside and using resources. For those of you who don't know, I was given almost like a contract extension to look at the signage and wayfinding along the Mary Carter Greenway Trail as it impacts Littleton, to look at making it more legible, to sort of look at reducing the number of signs. There's quite a few that have been put up all over time. And then to make the resource more available and daylighted for the community. So as you guys know, there's a connection via Little's Creek Trail to Mary Carter Greenway Trail in Littleton. I think we really began the conversation when we were thinking about signage and wayfinding for the downtown and making that trail connection legible. But as we got into the project and really looked at the resource in general, we've got some pretty exciting ideas. So where we are in the process, and I apologize because Mike uploaded this, which means I use my funky designer fonts, which means there are going to be some funkiness. Yeah, no, you're fine. So I'm going to cover a couple things really quickly. The project scope, where we are in the process, moving forward and next steps, and then there's time for Q&A. So given the weather and cold, I'll try and go as quickly as possible. So the goal of this project is to look at signage, both for the Greenway Trail as well as South Platte Parks. For those of you that don't know, Mary Carter Greenway actually goes through a section of South Platte Park. It's not that obvious from the trail that you're actually entering South Platte Park, but looking at signage for that area too. And then in the same vein, vehicular signage along West Mineral Avenue to let people know that the trail and the park are there and how to get to them. One of the biggest questions that we found when looking at existing conditions was just daylighting the resource and letting people know how to safely get there either via bike on foot, or if they're looking to drive and park and then bike and be on foot, how do they get there? Okay. So the project area, you can see that we're down to C470, and then we're up to Bellevue. And just because of the nature of sort of capturing the connections, the bubble extends so that we do capture things like Little's Creek Trail, making connections to the Highline Canal Trail, and then covering South Platte Park as well. So, as is typical, you guys are like signage design experts now. So this is very similar. We're looking at signage design. That's the palette. Then we're going to be looking at design guidelines. The way this came up is during the process, I was sort of functioning in the Littleton purview, and then we met with the South Platte Working Group, and municipalities like Englewood and Sheridan were like, what? We are also interested in our signage. So the design guidelines will allow the palette that is developed for this portion to get expanded as needed into adjacent municipalities so that we begin to have a common language for that. Also cost estimates, and then installation and implementation schedule. So looking at how they get installed, also how they're maintained after they are installed. So the considerations we had were, of course, because this is a City of Littleton project and we have just completed the signage program, how do we tie in? How do we celebrate that you're in Littleton along the trail at this point? And then we also have to be very considerate of South Suburban Parks and Recs, their graphic and maintenance standards. The signs that you'll see in this presentation were all made in the shop of South Suburban Parks and Rec. They have certain ways that they can build things. We've also learned that they have some flexibility and some openness to having signs constructed outside of their shop. But just being respectful of the stewards of these signs and how do we build and maintain what they can comfortably take on. And then that adjacent municipalities piece that sort of emerged after the project began. I blame Mike entirely for that. Thank you. Okay, so it's a 5-phase project. We've completed phases 1, 2, and 3, which were a lot of that celebrate the project for people so they know what's going on, do the research that I needed to make sure that I understood the resource and the existing signage, and then creating some preliminary design options that we then took out to the public. So the community and stakeholder outreach happened back when the weather was lovely. We had a couple of meet and greet events along the trail itself, so a Saturday and a Sunday, which were the heaviest use days. I was down at Hudson Gardens with some information, got some feedback, actually quite a lot. And then those banners and the stations were also at the Buck Recreation Center, the library, and the Carson Nature Center. Sorry, I had a brain fade.
Kristen, before you leave that, when you are making a team reference, I know we started with the City of Littleton, but you now have South Suburban Park and Rec, you have Englewood and Sheridan. As you've gone through phases 1 through 3, is the team that expansive group or limited?
The way we're approaching it, I reached out to the South Platte Working Group, which is where I intersected with the different municipalities, Englewood and Sheridan, and some other interest groups. They have kindly said, look, we agree to whatever your working group sort of comes up with. And for that, I'm really grateful. But yeah, they've looked at it like, you guys can figure out the palette. We're comfortable seeing the preliminary design options and the work that you've done for downtown, proceeding with that as the palette as we move forward.
I'll add to that, Mr. Mayor. The team, I guess, that we initially started out with is myself, and then reps from South Suburban, and Councilmember Stein has also been joining us in that discussion as well. So it's primarily City of Littleton and South Suburban who have been the team.
Thank you, Mike. So we're right now in phase 4, which means that we've just begun to draft the design guidelines. So I've taken all the comments that we received during the public outreach process, met with the working group to get their feedback, and we're going to be moving very quickly into refining the 3 different options into one final option, coming up with the guidelines that support it, and then having the final design guidelines. So you can see that we've got some stakeholder meetings. I'm coming to you tonight. I'll come back once we've gotten that final option to present that so you have an idea of where we're headed. I'm also meeting with Planning Commission. I've met once with the South Suburban Board of Directors, and then kind of that core working group as we work through how do we want to expand it. And then trail group representatives, users, and advocates. So with the S. That's just during the outreach process, made sure that we got all the trail groups represented that we needed to. So the first thing I did was look at existing conditions. You guys are really familiar with this because of the downtown project, but looked at the different types of signage, kind of categorically said this is what is out there, and then began to look at the condition. So the one thing, I'm going to go through this pretty quickly, but and let's all appreciate the warm weather Sorry, I'm not a cold weather person. When I was looking at this earlier today, I was so wishing that this weather existed now. So this is actually the Welcome to South Platte Park sign, and what you will take away from this is the big You've Arrived sign, which also looks like Welcome to the East Trail. This is kind of an arrival sign. But then it also looks like here's the Mary Carter Greenway Trail. So all of these are the same size. And when we start looking at legibility, the things that really drive a project like this are being reflective of the resource. So as beautiful as that resource is, make the signage look the same. And then also, what are we trying to communicate and how? And a lot of this information is really illegible unless you've stopped, gotten off of your bike. It's not very compelling. This is a story about why it's called the Mary Carter Greenway Trail. There's not a lot that really invites you to take that story in. So that's part of what we were looking at. And then additionally, from a user perspective, the maps that are currently available to figure out how to use the trail system have a couple difficulties. One is just kind of legibility. The maps are all sort of different directions and orientations. This one has north up, but sometimes north is a different way. And then, as is typical with older maps for trails in Colorado, we've got some gaps. So you can see that there's a red line. You can sort of implicitly connect the dots that red line is actually going to extend into what is not Littleton territory and connect up. But as a trail user, what you want to be able to do is figure out how to get from A to B, regardless of sort of what municipality you're in. So the way that we solve that problem is twofold. One, we definitely have larger trail maps at key areas that help orient people to the bigger system. And then the second is utilizing a QR code or an online code so that you can actually find an online map that will get you where you need to go based on destination. So some of these pictures really show, again, the different types of signage. Some of them are regulatory, how do you use a roundabout? Others are pointing to things like the Nature Center and Mineral Avenue. The difficulty with these kinds of signs is they're just not up to current legibility standards. So if you are a trail user, first of all, the location of this sign that helps point you to where to go is where you're also trying to navigate a roundabout. So that requires a certain degree of dexterity and difficulty. You have to be attentive to moving. So this information needs to come in advance of the roundabout. And then also from just a physical size standpoint, the text is too small and the arrows look like lines, not arrows. So until you're very close, you actually can't see the arrowhead, which tells you where to go. And also having this information divorced from the roundabout sign itself gives you sort of a double difficulty. So, for example, if we're able to take that roundabout, take Carson Nature Center and actually put it where the arrow is that says this is where you go on the roundabout to get to Carson Nature Center, we're just looking at a greater legibility, easier for users to navigate. And then for things like this, it's just daylighting what the heck this means. So you've got like all this information. A lot of people have a lot of difficulty understanding what is mile 13.5 of what, where does that begin, what am I doing in regard to tracking my distance, and then having it have the same visual weight as additional information. So the speed limit is 15 miles an hour, and then the actual address of the sign is 7100 South Easter. So taking aside the fact that, like, I don't know what 7100 Southeaster even means, right? So as a trail user, that really doesn't link me to something that's meaningful for me. The fact that it's all like the kerning, there's spacing that's the same between all of these. There's just not like mile 13.5, then more space, and speed limit 15 miles per hour, then more space in this. It's just it hits you all at once, and it's quite small. So as we design things like trail signage, we have to take into consideration that the speed limit is 15 miles an hour, which means you need to be able to take that information in legibly at those speeds. And then also look at, how we're parceling out some of this data so that it doesn't hit people all at once. So even if we've got it on one pole, making sure that we spread it out enough so that it's legible. And then we've got sort of different signage. River access point. This is our current downtown Littleton sign. So let's all breathe a sigh of sad for this sign. If you even happen to find it, it just doesn't really bespeak of the quality of experience that you offer in downtown Littleton. And I should also note that this is well after the turn, where you actually make your decision to go to downtown Littleton along the trail, which actually happens just south of EchoStar. There's nothing in the visual environment there that says, downtown Littleton, go this way, or if you're headed south, go this way. So the idea here is we want to make that linkage. One of the most satisfying parts of being on the trail for 2 days is that people were like, where can I get an ice cream cone? And I said, you know what? Here's the secret way to downtown Littleton. And I had so many people be like, are you serious? Really? Like, I thought that went to EchoStar or blah, blah, blah. And I said, no, you can get coffee, you can get shopping. So that was really gratifying for me personally, but also daylights the need for, in some places, an additional sign. Most of what we're looking at is actually peeling back layers that have gone in over time, but here's a place where we really need it. And then this is a little bit, to the point of clutter and what you're trying to say and how you say it so that people can actually take it in. And again, this is not a criticism of how things go together for signs, because honestly, this is really typical. This sign on the right probably went in 15 years ago. And then attention anglers probably went in, and then they were like, oh, well, we better say fishermen as well. And then, oh, yeah, like, no swimming too. So this idea of what are the messages and then creating a palette so that as stuff gets added, as it will, it fits within an idea of how you display that information, and the signage is designed so that it can accommodate it without it looking like hodgepodge. This is the sad linkage where there's so much downtown Littleton right here, but there's nothing to say. There's also, you can't see it very well in this picture, but there's also a lot of squealy, like I've just averted potential danger on my bike marks here on the concrete, because speed limit of 15 miles an hour or no, there are a lot of people that go very quickly along the Mary Carter Greenway Trail at this point, and because it's a bit of a blind entrance, there's a lot of like, so thinking about how we can make this improved in a bigger way, thinking about things like roundabout. They have a standard for roundabouts along South Suburban. Parks and Rec, this would be a really good place for something like that. It would increase safety. It would also give us more legibility to daylight downtown Littleton. So that's on the table. And then looking at what's been done well. So this is an interpretive piece. There's a lot more signage. I just have one little snippet of it here that talks about the floods and the impacts that it had on the configuration of the river and on the municipalities. So when the flooding happened, there were a lot of impacts. It's a great story to tell, and here they've done it with art and with really compelling signage. It's the only place where you see a story like this being told along the river and along the trail. And it's really great. So as we move forward, I'm not saying that I personally have to design every interpretive piece, but I want to program it and then look to partner with artists as the funds become available so that we can tell these stories in compelling ways and incorporate that into the guidelines so it's codified. And then we have the other side of the coin. It's the existing signage that talks about interpretation. This one's actually the sort of middling piece where you can see that there's some good information. You can read it if you've stopped. And this is a temporary signage program that's daylighting user expectations. So not having an earbud in all the time so you can actually hear if people are saying on your left. And then making sure that you have a dog on a leash. And the rule here is actually the dog has to be on a 6-foot leash. So as we look to develop icons that help tell the regulatory story, so definitely moving away from words and towards pictures, we would just add the 6 foot to something like this so that people know. And then there's beautiful art. I can never complain about that. And then we have private signs. So these are signs that are actually pointing to private development. In this case, it's Centennial Grill. But we also have an opportunity with existing developments like Riverside Downs, that are thinking about how they address the river. So initially the concept was that they really did want to address the river, but then the physical design of the space doesn't really allow for easy access. There's only stairs. It sort of turns its back. And signage along the trail would actually help advertise that if you're me and you're like, Starbucks rules your life, you know that you can get off here and you can get to a Starbucks, you can get to ice cream. And conversely, in the same way, making the connection for users of Riverside Downs to understand that this is a place where they can access the trail too. This also stands true for new development. There's quite a lot of new development along this corridor, stretching from Littleton, but also including Sheridan and Englewood. Those redevelopment projects are a great opportunity to do this kind of signage right away, so we're making sure to include them in the discussion. And then existing restaurants. Is it Lucille's? So Lucille's unfortunately turns its whole back to the trail, but thinking about how we can at least daylight that connection so that people understand that it's an occupied use. For many years, as you guys know, maybe you don't, I used to live in Littleton for many years. And so when I would use this trail, which took me 3 years to figure out that it was here. Now, that more bespeaks, I think, to my athleticism than anything, but it's not like I knew, right? So I feel like we need to really understand how to get new users. We have 1,000 people a day moving into the metro area, and one of the things that they choose, when people choose where to live, after wanting to not get stabbed on the way home, so safety, right? That's really important. The second most important thing is access to parks and trails. When people choose where they live, that's what drives that choice. And it doesn't matter if they're choosing an urban area or a suburban area across the board. The statistics are second choice. So if we are hoping to attract people to Littleton, then we have to daylight what's already here as well as build capacity. So you have an amazing trail system, some really lovely parks. Let people know that they are here. Okay, I'll get off my soapbox. So Hudson Gardens already does a really nice job of addressing the trail. It's also a great place to get a latte. Sorry, really, Starbucks does truly rule my life.
But now it's closed
Coffee.
until April.
Yes, and then this is actually how you access South Platte Park and a restroom. So things that people are looking for along the trail are things like restrooms, water, access to resources, places to take a break and get a snack. There's actually a really great place to get water and restrooms here, but there's no signage. So this is another area where we're looking to add a sign to help people understand that by making the choice to head west, they're able to get to things that are important to them. And then also just kind of understanding from a mapping standpoint, what are the, what do we call these? There's a name for this.
Habit trails.
Social trails. I heard another one too, habit trails. Yeah, that makes it sound like little gerbils. But yes, this idea of what are the social trails, what are people saying with their feet in regard to making connections and wanting to have linkages, looking at that. And then once we get into the nitty-gritty, really looking at every single piece and redoing it. I mean, straight out, that's where we're at. So less little text, more pictures that tell that story, maps that have a lot easier user experience, make it easier as a user to experience the trail, and then just kind of developing a hierarchy that makes sense. So when I went through the existing conditions, these are the big higher order things that I found that weren't really working that well. So this is an auto sign for Gateway. It doesn't indicate that there's parking there. It's actually called Reynolds Landing, which again, as a Littleton resident, for a long time I thought it was a boat dock. And it wasn't until we went there to do pumpkins one year that I realized that it was actually a trailhead. So just considering that, it needs to be a little bit clearer as far as what you're promising with this sign. This is also the same exact size of sign that just indicates that you're at Lee Gulch along the trail. So we think about hierarchy here. You're definitely not wanting to use your auto sign as your destination sign along the trail. And then this informational piece, everything's sort of at the same size and scale. It's a bit confusing. It's a bit haphazard. Just kind of looking, again, to make this more clear, more easier for users to use. And then the regulatory stuff, just kind of creating size and scale and color that helps tell the story so that people aren't having to read every little bit of every sign to figure out what is this trying to tell me. And then the recommendations are all about hierarchy, using colors and fonts, making linkages. That's that retail piece. It also touches on trail linkages. And, with Mary Carter being really the primary trail, what are those secondary trails that it hooks into? And then using a symbol palette rather than a lot of text. The distance marker information needs to be clearer, more legible. That creative piece in interpretive signage is really key. And then adding vehicular access and entrance signs that have a parking symbol that let people know that it's actually a trailhead for parking. And then develop private-public partnerships for that private signage along the trail. So one of the things that we did as part of outreach was actually gut checking this destination piece. These are the things that we're pointing people to as they're along this segment of the trail. We've got the working group actually looking at this too. So as you go through the process with us, it would be helpful to know if there are any additional destinations that you feel that we've missed. I assume that these guys will see this after tonight. If not, then get with me personally if you like. Here's your 5 seconds. I'm just kidding, but seriously, if you would look at this piece after tonight, get back to me with anything that you feel like I've missed or that we should think about.
Well, I'll mention two right off. You had a picture of one, which is Lucille's. That's right there along the trail, and then another is Nixon's, which is that refreshment stop that's at Hudson Gardens. So it's not just Hudson Gardens and Event Center, but there's Nixon's, which is the coffee shop.
I completely agree. And that's
There was a picture of it.
No, there was a picture, but it's not on the list. Because I will tell you, even though Nixon's wasn't open on Sunday, there were 25 people there.
Yeah, well, it's a really great hangout. That's why we chose to have the thing there. I think it's a good rest stop for people as well, especially coming from Denver, just to have a breather. So it was Nixon's and then it was Lucille's?
Yes. They're right on the trail.
I agree. Thank you. Anybody else? Really quickly, I don't want to. And don't feel like this is like speak now or forever hold your peace. So if you need time to digest, please do.
And if you have any spots, you can.
Oh, good. All right. Thanks for throwing yourself under that bus, Mike. Tell Mike, and he will tell me. So the way that we approached this project, very similar to downtown Littleton, came up with 3 different options. Now, the caveat to these options is that they were developed with the understanding that we absolutely had to use the South Suburban Parks and Rec sign shop. Then, throughout the process, we were told that, maybe we could think about something that was not doable by South Suburban Parks and Rec. So even though we got sort of ABC comments on these options, we filled in with some visual preference imagery. So when we kicked off the outreach with the Hudson Gardens event, and we started asking these types of questions, providing a little bit of information about the project. But really the goal of the event was to get feedback on visual preferences, what people liked, what pictures appealed to them for trail signage, where they thought trail signage needed to be. So a lot of things came out of this that were really important for users. Things like make sure that you put the name of the road on underpasses. It sounds like a small thing, but that's not something I would have necessarily considered by myself. And I definitely heard that from the group, so that was really good. And then also getting this dot vote of like, what do I like and why? So some of the pictures were put on because of style. Others were how they told information, how they presented information. And then the others were a lot of scale, like what reads as a gateway, what reads as a sign that you would use as a person who doesn't want to get off their bike, who's trying to take in information as a passerby. Then after all of that information went out, I did a ranking. So each image, this looks like math, so I apologize, but each image, the vote was tallied according to where it was. Then we kind of got the final vote and then sort of did that short list of elements that people liked the best. The key themes of that are they really liked artistic elements. There was a preference for symbols over text. There was a question and a need for durability of materials. Make sure that they're very durable. Make sure that they're legible, mile markers that needed to have a map graphic, so not just a 13.5, but even just a line that shows where you are in that 13.5 mile journey. And then the preferred materiality were steel, wood, and stone, and then transparency. So this alludes to the fact that people didn't want the signs to be so big. And if we needed to say a lot of information, make sure that it's on some kind of material that has visual transparency so that they don't occupy a lot of visual space. So these were kinds of images that were highly ranked. You can see that B really it's an interpretive piece. It's very artistic. It has a river story as well, so you can see how that actually cuts across the concrete. So those are pebbles that are embedded into the concrete, so it was saw cut, and that was installed after. Then the Ohio River Trail one actually speaks to the scale. So you've got a blow-up map that shows your whole trail system and then the detail of where you are. HH you probably recognize from the downtown Littleton signage, because I use this quite a bit to tell the story of using a mobile device, QR code-based information to get additional larger scale stuff. And then F and T really had to do with simplicity and legibility. And DD had a lot to do with symbology. And then I also put a couple of things on. There was a request for more seating, more trash. So the ones that people really resonated with were QQ and SS as far as that was concerned. And then EE people just liked. I think it's just because it's artistic and it's beautiful. It is an art piece. It's a gateway into a park. So it just had a really strong preference for people when we asked them. Then we also recorded people's thoughts, and I did a word cloud for that just to show the things that came up the most. But this is just a pretty graphic. The way I really used this information was made the list. It directed my goals and options and final design ideas. So, but you can kind of see that there are things, cost, bikes, map, the trail and the signs and I sort of threw out because they're obviously why there were a lot of words along those lines. But you can see that a lot of these are actually use-based, so things like walkers, walking, shopping, options, layout, clarity. And then the dot voting results for the ABC options, were done. And there was a clear preference for option B overall. But again, that really is just for fodder of discussion, because we also got a lot of additional information from the visual preference. So you guys are familiar with this. We kind of do A, B, C, and then D is a completely different option. So it will be the same for this project. When I come back, you will see a D option that resembles the things that people liked about A, B, and C, but is definitely D. And then moving forward in next steps, again, we're right into draft design guidelines. And the remaining steps are really about creating more legible components. So that's digging in, not to just the overall aesthetic, but how do we make the maps and the symbols, the directional elements, clearer, easier to use. Then developing that style and design for the palette, which includes the guidelines that will be used for other municipalities. And then present the recommended palette for review, comment, and direction. So that will start at the working group. That will start at the working group that Mike explained, then expand out to the South Platte working group, and then the other municipalities, and then back to you guys. So that's really where we are in the process. And I'm open for questions.
Good job, thanks. And I'm certainly not a sign person, so.
You will be.
But
I feel like you will be.
Many of the signs I saw that are existing don't bother me that much, like the ones that said, mile 13 and a half, that kind of stuff. Part of what I like now is that when you're down there, you do feel like you're outdoors. Whereas if you have too many certain types of signs, it starts to feel almost city or industrialized. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
It does.
So I'm not necessarily into having a nice fancy sign. If someone's on a bike and they can't read the sign, then they need to stop and read the sign if they want to read it. But I like simple signs, that's for sure. But I like that feel of, because when you're down there on the river, it gives you a sense of being kind of away from the city. And a sign, like that song, sign everywhere, sign, kind of makes you feel like you're in the city again.
It does, and that's one of the things that we really heard from the public too. Like, if anything, can you remove some signage and then make sure that the new signs are compatible with the resource? They don't call attention to themselves as much as just allow people to effortlessly use it while still being, I'm in the job of aesthetics too. So making sure that they're attractive is definitely part of the mandate. But I think in this context, reflective of the resource is really what's driving that aesthetic consideration.
Cool. Thanks.
Cool.
Bruce?
The signs that say things like 13.5 or 13 or whatever, I know that those matter to people who are trying to increase their mileage on running, or they're trying to reach a certain goal, or they're going to go a certain distance on a bicycle in a certain time, that kind of thing. So they have some value to trail users. I just wanted to comment on that.
No, they really do. Even I use trails a lot, if you would believe it. But I find that my impact with them has less to do with goal setting and more to do with just being somewhere attractive, because most of them are in really pretty places. But from a mileage standpoint, it's providing the context. So none of that information will go away, but it will be a lot more contextual. And really, it's almost as simple as a line that kind of indicates a little bit of how the path goes and where you are on it, right? So 13.5 miles that start where and end where, and where are you, in relation to that. So really simple. Something that you can do on a pole that literally has just the line and some destinations.
Comments? Thank you, Kristen.
Thank you. Sorry I was late.
And be safe getting back.
Yeah, I was just going to ask if I was free to go. The traffic is so bad. I can't tell you. Well, if you have anything additional, since Mike so generously was like, I will act as a steward to questions, please. But my contact information, can I leave a card? You're welcome to email me directly. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to talk about the project.
And Council, we're going to embark now on
Right.
taking a look at the Charter Review Committee reports.
After
And that-
break.
And so I was going to say, let's take a break. I was getting there. And so if we can break for 7 minutes and get back in our chairs, and then we're ready to go.
You have your own? You want another one?
Okay, Council, if we could reconvene?
Means you, Bruce.
Okay. We commissioned a charter review committee, and they gave us a report earlier this year. And as we look at the potential to put items for charter change, that would have to go through the ballot process, and who knows what opportunities we may have as far as the ballot process is concerned. I don't expect we will make it through the entire set of recommendations or changes, and as a focus on that, some that are more policy related items we might begin to take up this evening. If we don't make it through this, we will have some additional opportunities, but what I was going to suggest is we put a time frame of about an hour on this and see how far we go, and in the interest of wanting everyone to make it home so they can have a nice warm sleep tonight before getting started on tomorrow when we're going to be experiencing some single digits would maybe be okay. Is that fit with the council's kind of sound okay? Okay. In sequence for these, there were a number of sections that were referenced. My thought is we can maybe begin to cover those by sequence, but I'm open if anyone else has those, but we had those that were communicated to us in an email earlier today. Does that sound like a reasonable approach?
Start there.
Okay. First item up is the...
Mayor, can I just add one thing before you jump in?
Nope.
So I just want to remind council that, was that a no?
I was going to see whether you were going to listen.
I know, I wasn't going to listen to you.
Excellent listening skills.
Thank you.
We almost got out of here for
Yes. This is part of the 60 minutes, so just appreciate it. So I just wanted to add, in addition to the 14 people that this council had appointed, we had Wendy Hefner, our city clerk, Becky Fye, our executive assistant to the city attorney and city manager's office, and we had Kristen and myself who were the staff liaisons, and then we brought in folks like Doug Farman or specific area experts as we work through this. And so as that document coalesced in the final recommendation, the CRC group really broke the recommendations into what I would describe as two different areas. One were those administrative / technical areas, which were items where Tabor might have superseded the charter language, or there are new generally accepted accounting principles, and you'll see toward the end of the sections, there's whole sections of the finance piece that the CRC recommended taking out, and that's just because the world of accounting has changed since whenever that one was done. I don't know if it was original in '56, I think it was, or not, but there were those types of changes, and then there were definitely some, as we've identified, the top kind of 12 or 13 in here, which were policy changes, policy issues where there was a majority and then a minority group that said, hey, council, you need to have some conversation around those. So just add a little bit of context to the background on what is totality in this document and why we picked the ones that we picked. And at the mayor's request, we were trying to focus so that we weren't spending a lot of time on those more technical administrative ones. Not that if the council desires to talk about those, but I think we'll do those, as the mayor pointed out, at a separate meeting. So with that, would you like to go back to the prefatory statement?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Although I may
Apologize.
turn over to Kristen and say, would you like to make any early comments?
No, thank you.
No. Thank you.
Okay. So beginning with the prefatory synopsis, I was going to turn to the staff folks if they wanted to make some comments on this, not necessarily to twist it, but they can maybe give us a flavor of what the review committee had, sharing with us both majority and minority report as a beginning, and then we can have whatever discussion we may choose.
I was actually kind of surprised that this was such an issue with the committee. I think part of the problem was that at some point in the codification, this had been dropped off, And so it was sort of flagged as, why did it disappear? It since has been put back in the online codification. And some of the CRC members felt very strongly that this should be, be retained in the, in the charter as it was when it was drafted. And some felt, very strongly that, what the reasons why they adopted the charter back in 1956 don't make sense if this is sort of what you're leading, with as you, crack open the charter and begin to look through it. So, anything else, Michael?
No, I think it's actually really that simple. It was, do you need a introductory statement to your charter or do you not?
Discussion by council?
So I think it's more a do you want rather than do you need, and I like it, and I'd actually like to keep it and add a statement about having had a charter review committee in 2014 that reaffirmed the objectives of the 1953 folks. It's just a nice kind of background.
And so let me ask a question. Is it possible to have, along with the charter, some background components on the charter that aren't part of the charter document itself, which is the guiding kind of soul of the city, but to have historical ins and outs and items like that that can be referenced, getting to Councilmember Cole's point of it provides a historical component, but it's also not very operative, given that we're almost 125 years hence our original incorporation.
I think, certainly. I mean, I think we do that in a lot of other documents where we have an introductory section for it, or an appendix. I mean, there's a variety of ways to do it. The difference, of course, is this ultimately would go to a vote of the people, and so the people will have spoken and said, these are the words that we want, and we want it in there. And so that is a question to you. Both acquire the same thing. This is a lot of discussion in this first minute on what the CRC went through in terms of did you value it, did you not value it? And there's no legal requirement, so it is, do you desire it?
And I guess also just to add on to that, do you feel strongly one way or the other to actually go through the process of putting it on the ballot?
Good point.
When you talk about majority versus minority, what are we talking here? 50-50, 90-10 kind of thing? I mean, we're talking one or two people were fired up to put this
I think it varies. Generally, it was, I would say, a very small handful that felt very strongly about it. There might be one or two where it was closer, and we'll try to point that out as we go through.
I think the committee actually discussed whether to put numbers in there, and I think they intentionally did not because they didn't want it to become 13 people supported the majority and one was a minority. So we tried to identify in the majority recommendation, so a majority of your CRC members proposed removal and a minority, but rather than getting into the numbers.
My sense would be on some of this stuff. I mean, I don't have any problem putting it in, as an appendix or some sort of explanatory document as to what's going on. I think if our objective here is to clean this thing up, less is more. So I'd probably leave it out.
I like history and I like knowing where we came from, but it doesn't necessarily need to be part of the charter, but I would like it to be somewhere.
Agree.
Okay, so if I put an action would be to consider this as a charter amendment then, taking it to the vote, but to capture it elsewhere.
Got it.
Council, or capture it elsewhere as in?
A history reference or a...
Not in the charter itself.
Not in the charter. Yeah.
Okay, so just to clarify, that we would need a charter amendment to actually remove it, and is that the direction we're?
Well, we're getting to that, but we're not taking a vote. So
I know, just, okay.
Yes.
All right.
But you would need a...
Yeah, and I think part of, to Kristen's comment there at the end, when we get closer to the conclusion of working through this entire document, we will need to talk about how we package these, timings of when you want to move things forward. Do you want to do it as one gargantuan package? Can we package it in a couple different questions to the ballot? When do you want to do that? That type of thing. And one of the things Kristen's going to be looking for is what are the things you want to move forward, in what ways, and in what ways we can package those things that you guys ultimately say you want to move forward with. So we have talked extensively months ago about this, and it is on our radar screen. Right now, we just, rather than talking about strategy and how you move that forward, I think we want to keep you focused just on this. So we will discuss that, though. So
Thank you for letting us know we have more work to do.
Yes, we're just getting started.
So the next item that was on the policy list for consideration is in Section 7.
So we had extensive discussion. It's primarily on page 5 under the publication section, where the language says publication, published, posted, or published means, except where publication in a newspaper is specifically required by this charter or state statute, the terms publication.
And we've read that before.
You've read that. I was reading it for those who don't have it.
Okay.
Fine. So there was a lot of discussion about what does the future of posting mean? How do you reach the greatest number of citizens in our community and make them aware of meetings and activities that are happening from their local government? And the assumption that newspaper may or may not be the future of how that communication occurs, but it probably will be around for a while, but we don't really know what that crystal ball is. And so looking at some of that language saying using the best technology available, so the majority of the CRC group really felt like broadening that language was important in order to let the council, future councils, have greater flexibility along and directive of staff of how to communicate to citizens as the years flow. And that was one of the trends that they really looked for, I think, in looking and thinking about the proposed language, was what language would which would stand the test of time. So we weren't looking back at this in 10 years and go, well, they use the word newspaper or website, and the word website may not be a term 10 years from now for all we know. And so to try to use words like, what was it, the best technology available, that type of thing. Kristen, anything?
Yeah, there was a lot of discussion on this, and I guess the one other thing I'd want to point out is that they added in the last sentence about allowing you annually to decide what that is. And as you know, every year you do establish what our official newspaper for publications will be and where the official postings occur at the Bemis Library and at the museum. So this would be a sort of a similar sort of resolution that the clerk's bringing forward every year, so that we're not pinning it down in the charter, we're not pinning it down in ordinance, but the sitting council decides each year how they want to reach their constituents.
Randy?
I would agree. I think certainly 10 years from now, and likely even 5 years from now, there will exist a means of accomplishing this that we cannot possibly even imagine. So I would be very supportive of that.
Bruce?
I'm supportive of it, but I just want to mention that in Section 27, there is a provision that says local public media very specifically in there, and so there may be some other cleanup that we need to do that by accepting this in some other places. Now, and I saw that in Section 27, special meetings of the council, and it gets down and says, provided that local media are notified. What local media is, based on what we just talked about.
That sounds like there's some pushback.
No, I have no problem with it. I also don't necessarily have a problem with the minority suggestion about having it published or posted in hard copy for those who so desire.
And again, I think to Kristen's point, that would be part of that resolution annually to.
Yeah, no, I could certainly do that. You know,
And just to add to what Bruce just mentioned, I think as long as we're going to have physical council meetings, we're not going to be virtual somewhere, but we're going to have physical meetings and that get posted somehow at that location, whether it's on an electronic billboard or it's a hard copy on a bulletin board. I'd be open to that, but I would say post it where we're going to meet so that folks would have an idea of where that is or what it is we're going to be talking about, where we're going to be meeting.
Other digital imagery.
Yes.
So I have a question that
Yes,
comes
Peggy.
up with this. If there are bloopers in here or inconsistencies in the format kinds of things, should we bring those up now or point them out later?
Well, I would probably leave those for later because this is actually not the format of the charter as it ends up.
No, but I'm on this one, just as an example. All these others are words with a definition, a word with a period, for example. This one doesn't start that way. It's just a sentence. So if we take out the word means in the first line and put a period after published, that makes it parallel to the other entries. Does that?
Okay. So what you'd like to see, then, if I could reinterpret, is a style consistency through the document.
Yeah.
Some would like the capitalization of council throughout, would make that as a note.
And
Got it.
the
Yep.
others that I notice I can call attention to later that I found some, but that one was the only one I think that was out of that format.
And you can just bring those to us,
Right,
Peggy,
that's
since we're
what I'm
focused
saying.
on the policy
I wanted to
issues.
get permission to do that, so.
Sounds fine?
And then, so we're not going to be looking at anything before the point we got to now?
I wouldn't say that, Peggy. I would say to the extent you believe it's a policy issue, you could bring it up. But if it's a technical amendment, I was thinking those could be grouped and considered at a later date, kind of almost en masse.
For section 6, I had an issue. I wanted to point out something.
Mm-hmm.
So the proposal is to change city treasurer to finance director. But we know from the past several months, we've been cleaning up some ordinances with words, we now have new terms, we change them. It would seem to me better to not use the term finance director because some point in the future, somebody might want to change that. If we're changing city treasurer to finance director, if we do this, I think it would be better to say chief financial officer, and then whatever the darn title of that person is taken care of if the title changes. Is that somebody?
In my world, chief financial officer is a job title, so you could pick finance officer. I don't know that chief.
If you don't capitalize it, then it's a generic. But whatever. I just wanted to raise that issue. I just didn't want us to put a name, a title in there, and then as the world changes, maybe something else happens, and we've got a charter issue just because we gave it a particular title.
Finance officer.
Yeah, officer.
Designated finance officer or some such thing. That's fine, is it?
Well, I think it should say finance director because the operating structure of the city is a city manager, and then he has directors underneath him, and the finance director is the director of the finance department, financial department. And in some ways, it's a generic term that describes what that particular job is. I think that the treasury officer or whatever it was, that is a dated term. I don't think the finance director will date itself out in, even 20 years. And frankly, this charter ought to be looked at more frequently than every 50 years too. So
I think the time frame the group had suggested was every 10 years.
Correct.
yeah, and in doing so, if something kind of as normal as finance director or public works director, community development director changes.
I don't
some
think,
sort
I'll
of-
look at Kristen, but I don't think it has legal implications. It's more of just a grammatical cleanup type of thing.
Correct.
So,
And I think if it becomes outdated, it's as we're operating now that we understand that the treasurer's, that position is held by our finance director. So I think as long as we're committed to every 10 years going through this process, I think we'll catch those. But
Yeah.
Okay. So getting back to Section 7, folks were generally in favor of moving that forward for consideration. Then we move to Section 10, and elections are governed.
I'm going to let Kristen get into this because it was primarily a clerk issue.
yeah, I wished Wendy was here. So this is a request that her office had to very specifically state that we would be looking to Title 31, the Colorado Municipal Election Law, to govern our elections. Right now, you do have our ordinance on elections does specify that, but I think she just wanted it very clearly stated in the charter. Also, I just want to note, we didn't list number 11, section 11 as a policy question, but there actually is one in there, so
We'll get to
I
that
don't
in a
want
section.
to
How's
jump
that?
over that one.
Good catch.
Section 10 comments? Or, I do have one question about the statement in the governance here. There is a inconsistency in between the state requirements and municipal requirements with regard numbers of days of residence, 22 versus 30. Does this put us into the state requirement, and then do we have to clean up our language elsewhere?
In 13, we'll get.
Yeah, and that inconsistency's been fixed. There was a time period where the legislature hadn't cleaned that up.
Yeah, but I was just saying, in the past, does that move us away from, or do we have the future conflict issues? That's what I'm asking.
I think that this clears that up, but I will double check. That would be my understanding.
Okay. Just
And in 13, they recommend, and it's not, they had it in as a technical amendment to clarify the 22-day residency requirement.
Ah, good point. Yes.
But in 13, why wouldn't you just say the same thing as, qualified elector requires you meet state statute?
Because it says less.
22 is state.
It's 22 state.
22 is now the state.
But if they change it, why wouldn't we just, rather than fix it, why wouldn't we just want to say we'll mirror the state all the time?
Without Wendy here, I can't tell you why they made this discussion to specifically call out, but everyone agreed that we should do the 22, so we can certainly look in. We have plenty of time.
I see your point that if it changes in the future, then we're
Yeah.
locked into
Yeah.
22, yeah.
Why we didn't is because we're home rule, but that's okay.
I think maybe the overwhelming thing is just technical, and we have a consolidated voting system. We do it with the county, with the state, or whatever, but it's a county-run circumstance, and that's where the electors are determined to be qualified electors to vote. I mean, that's how that's done, and I think they're looking for one system, one way, one.
This was in our last election. Thankfully, we did not have any close votes, but the differential between the 30 and the 22 could come up, and our elections are actually administered by the county clerks, and we run across 3 counties. So having something that differs from the state can be confusing. How we can have it is because we're home rule.
I understand.
Okay, so Kristen, you're going to check on that consistency piece
Yes.
of language and whether we should mimic language in Section 10 to Section 13.
I will get back to you. When we were dealing with this, we were sort of in the midst of all that confusion, and so I'll look back and give you a clearer answer.
And then moving to Section 11, which is, again, a policy question, as pointed out by Kristen, is currently our election commission is 2 appointed and 1 of the city clerk, so it's a 3-member group. This moves that to the city clerk being a non-voting member and then having 5 qualified, which would be appointees as electors to the commission. So that's where the change is. Any discussion around this? Okay, so move that one forward as well. And then Section 13 wasn't on our list, but we have the consistency question on that, which moves us to Section 16, which is regarding the method of voting.
I think the question, the core policy question was, should the election commission make that decision as an appointed board, or should the city council make that determination of the method of voting for the election for the city?
What number are we on?
Section
16.
Which I have is on page 9. Bill? Bruce?
So, that's a new one.
Yeah. I don't know where that came from. So.
Yeah, okay. Is the argument against city council that doing it, that if potentially you'd have a city council member being recalled that would be determining how?
No, this says when there is an election, that the method of providing for the proposals and the candidates, except when there's a recall, will be the city council. When there's a recall, it will be the election commission.
Okay, never mind.
You have to see that period that's there.
What I'm looking for.
The period is there after directs.
Okay.
There was some thought, though, if you look at the minority, that in all cases the election commission should retain that to remove the political component. I think that was the theory from the choice, and it got back to, you all are our elected body. You should be the ones choosing how our elections are run, not an appointed group of currently 3 and potentially 5. So, and then obviously, as the mayor pointed out, if there's a recall, there was concern about that the council might manipulate that to protect a recall.
Okay, good. Peggy?
So why not the council all the time? I think I might know the
I think
logic.
the concern was that in a recall, that the council could choose a type of voting which could protect the recall, the potential council member who is recalled, and they thought in a situation where there's a recall, that authority should be pulled away from the council, because the council might have too much of a political vested interest in the type of voting and shift it and have the election commission, just to create some separation, kind of church and state, if you will.
But the staff didn't ultimately agree with that?
No, I don't think we had a strong opinion one way or the other. I don't think Wendy's big piece was she thought she should not be a voting member as a city clerk, and that you should expand. That's where that expansion recommendation came from on the previous one. In this one, this was really, I don't even remember who brought it up initially for it. So,
But I mean, in that.
Okay.
Deb?
Method of voting, that means,
So this would be whether you're doing, vote for one, vote for your top 2. It's the approval voting that you've.
I was going to say approval.
I was going to
voting.
say
I wanted to
mail-in, ballot?
No, this
Okay,
would
so-
be if we're, like right now, we have a system where you vote for one candidate, but as you know, I don't remember the gentleman's name.
Frank
Yeah.
Is it home hollering?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right, he's excited.
has appeared before the Election Commission asking them to change the method of voting in the city of Littleton to approval voting. And it came down to the 2 members and the clerk who decided that the city of Littleton should not go to approval voting. And I think that's what the clerk was getting at. Now, with this the staff comment, I think this comment reflects our initial recommendation, which was just to be that the method of voting would be as city council directs, and then Charter Review Committee, when they looked at it, came in and added this provision about a recall election and carved that out for that to go back to the Election Commission. So that's what it's reflecting some history there.
Jerry?
I can see where, on a recall, it could be more than one council person being recalled. So I'm okay with it going back to the election committee or board, wherever they're.
So I'm struggling a little bit with this, because when in the existing charter, does that really conceive of this kind of thing of the choose all the ones that you'd be satisfied with? I thought it was more you mail it or you do something else. So do we need to define someplace method of voting? Not what's required, but just what is meant by that word?
I don't believe so. I think it's up to you guys, but I think it's very clear that when in method of voting, it's, as Kristen described, it's a discussion around top one, pick the top three.
Have we ever decided that? I don't remember.
Oh. Panic.
Yes. Don't panic.
Jerry, are you going to behave yourself? Thank you very much. Jerry Paul's the panic buttons are over, so.
That's what he's
We've
just announced that on.
Yeah, I know. Now everyone knows to come get it.
Excellent.
Of course, on the roads are bad.
I don't recall.
No panicking. But
I don't recall ever doing that.
What's that? Well, it doesn't come before the council because it comes.
Oh, it was on
it goes to the election
Got
commission,
it. Okay.
and those guys have been. There have been many presentations by citizens who have requested the election commission to change the city's method of voting.
Okay.
And there is concern that currently 3 people, well 2, can change the city's election method.
Okay.
For the entire city with 2 votes out of 3, so raise that so there's a larger threshold.
Right.
And then, as is proposed here, keep that with the elected body, because then if we don't like what you do, we vote differently next election season.
Okay.
In
I'm
this,
fine with it.
I think with the council determining the method, that it does not preclude requests to the election commission for a recommendation either. So,
right.
So that is always open. But as Kristen pointed out, it does open the city council to a lobbying effort by folks.
Okay.
Okay. So anyone have a sentiment not to take this forward? Okay.
Forward.
Okay. Move us forward. Next I have on the list is section 22.
Page 10.
Which is starts on page 10 and goes to 11 and moves on. This has to deal with the terms, and probably the biggest operative piece is moving the seating of new council to the first regularly scheduled meeting in January.
Oh, hell no.
That is correct. And you also, I just point out that you had one email from a citizen who had an opinion on this particular one, and I will tell you that there was a lot of discussion, and again, this will be up to you guys of do you take your seat immediately, or do you do, as a lot of places do, January 1? And obviously there's some pros and cons around having a lame duck council in that scenario. Some of the discussion from some of the CRC members was an opportunity for education and for those new council members, councilmen-elect, I guess we would call them, to attend council meetings, to get training from the staff about how things work, all those types of things. And that was kind of, I think, the strongest argument for was this opportunity for kind of coming up to speed. The argument against, obviously, is that you have a multi-month period there where you've got people who are not going to be continuing, and know they're not going to continue. So, which we obviously have in other parts of our governance. As we
completely oppose it.
Bruce?
Yeah, before I got the letter from the interested citizen, I had written no lame duck. And I really think that whatever the benefits might be, having a lame duck session is far worse.
Yep.
And I would not support it at all.
And I actually like Jim Taylor sent us a thing. I actually like his idea. Next meeting after the election.
Yeah, I think actually where we sit is it's not as much the next meeting, it's the first meeting after the certification of the ballots. So, I mean, because you do need that certification.
That's where we are now.
And it's usually 2 weeks is their time frame, so it usually is the next meeting.
Usually,
so
okay.
Practically, we have to wait for that certification to occur. I concur with the sentiment to have it be the first eligible meeting after certification. So, Randy?
Frankly speaking, from experience, there's ample opportunity for the candidates who I think should be interested enough in council proceedings to attend council meetings and get up to speed. I think that should be kind of a rite of passage, really, although voluntary. So I don't see any real need for this lame duck situation and somebody who's probably uninvested in the outcome of 2 months worth of meetings so I would support that too.
I'm going to try and make a summary on this item, which is notwithstanding the language cleanup that's included here to refer to council members as opposed to councilmen, that be moved forward. But as far as changing when new council members would be seated, not to move ahead with that. Okay.
And did you want to speak to the other public comment rating related to 4-year to run again versus 2-year?
Are you talking about Jim Taylor's letter? Is that what you're talking about? Okay, so let's say Jim Taylor instead of whatever it is.
Interested citizen Jim Taylor.
There you go.
Okay.
It's still in 22. It's on page 13, but it's still section 22.
And we currently have a 4-year off after a term limit before you can come back on. Council, any thoughts on that?
I think 2 is sufficient, honestly. I think if you're off for, if you go 12 and you're off for 2, 4 seems excessive to me.
Bruce?
I think our system, the way it goes with 4 districts and 3 at large, having 2 years works because that gives you a chance to run maybe from a district to an at-large or from an at-large to a district, and I don't see a problem with it.
I'm opposed. I think it should be 4 years because it seems to me that if you just put a little 2-year gap in there, it's hardly really what a term limit is because somebody could recycle back in and be on for 12 more years, which, if they get elected and all that's fine. But the reality is we have every year been running at least 1 seat of the 4 that we have every other year, right, unopposed. So you could not have a great deal of changeover. And so I think 4 years is a good amount of time to take a break.
Peggy?
So I think it should be 2. I think the very fact that we've had a few unopposed candidates suggests it's not like there's this stampede of people wanting to serve. So if we've got good people, if you've got people running for election, the citizens will decide whether to re-elect them or not. And I just think the 2 is adequate.
Barry, you want to weigh in?
The whole point of having, say, the 2 or 4 years, or the term limits, that is to get fresh blood into the system. I think if by waiting 2 years, and as Councilman Brickman said, it almost just opens it up for that same person to come right back. I think it's good for a 4-year separation. Term limits, I think, are good. I'm not opposed to term limits, and if it's only 2 years, it's not really any term limit whatsoever. The purpose of a term limit is to get fresh blood, even though you do lose good people, but you also get good people. So 2 years is not adequate, that's for sure.
Uncharacteristically, I don't have a real strong opinion. I actually agree with both Councilmember Valdez and Councilmember Brinkman. But I also feel that there is some symmetry to the 2 years in that that's how often council keeps talking about a new council after 2 years and a new mayor after 2 years. And so my sense is that, just doing the mental math, that the majority here, even were I to disagree, would be to move it forward for 2 years. So I wouldn't object to that. If my math is wrong, then I'll make a decision.
Bill didn't say what he was in.
I didn't say anything.
Okay. I was looking at your body language, but maybe I'm wrong.
Even if we split a vote on this one, allowing it to go to the electorate lets them get to make the decision on this. I could stay with 4. I think it's a good time to spend time off. I understand we have elections every 2 years, and I understand that if someone has come off of a 4-year term, whether it's at large or that, they might be in a position to kind of switch to a district or such in that kind of time frame. I actually think we should have elections every 4 years, because every 2 years is, we have a little bit of that staggering, but the at-large piece, and Councilmember Cole and maybe Councilmember Stallman can kind of speak to, and Councilmember Beckman can kind of speak to that 2 years part of the term is being kind of tough. I'm tempted to leave it at 4, but that leaves you as a
I'm convinced. 4.
Okay.
So I do have an observation. Maybe something else needs to get refined here. If you're elected to serve in a particular, like, at-large or for a district, that's what you're elected to. That's your term of office, right? You're in that position. Is this clearly saying what, because I think what this is meaning, but is this clearly saying that you couldn't run for a different position on council?
The term limit component, and Kristen, you can help me on this. My understanding is it's consecutive years, so it could be whether it's at large or district, it's either 12 or 14 consecutive years puts you at a term limit.
Yeah, it's in the bottom of page 12 in the paragraph. Notwithstanding anything contained herein to the contrary, no council member shall be entitled to serve consecutive terms of office exceeding 12 years in duration.
So regardless of whether you're at large for some of those and representing the district, you're sitting on council for 12 years.
Okay.
Does that answer it?
And then CRC recommended clarifying language related to the recess conversation you guys are having.
Sentiment of council at this point in time is to leave it as a 4-year hiatus.
Okay.
Okay. Moving on to, and I can appreciate folks knowing 2 and 4, but folks that have had an election come up after 2 years can probably also, I mean, it's one side of the table talking about that, and the others are sitting here at 4, so it's kind of an interesting split. So,
Is that something you want to change?
no, I'm at 4. I was just making an observation that everyone over here has had a 2-year term.
It was a little Phil humor.
Yeah, it was just a
But I mean,
observation. So.
because you mentioned a discussion about the 2-year, is that something you think, because that's something we could talk about?
We could. I'm not sure how to restructure some of where we're at to get to that point. So it's a complicated question.
Mm-hmm.
And quite honestly, it's not just what we do here on council, but I think the U.S. Congress and the state legislature on the House side my experience in working with those folks is it seems like they never get to stop campaigning when you're on 2-year terms, consecutive pieces. And it's hard to get focused on getting some things done when you're worrying about an election and essentially a year and a half after you basically get moving and grooving. So Okay. Moving on to Section 24.
Question on 23. Do we officially have nominations for council? I'm trying to remember all the terminology, whatever.
Is that the petition?
Yeah, 50 signatures.
Yeah, but is it called a nomination is what I'm saying.
I don't think so.
I think you sign a petition to nominate the candidate. You need 50 good signatures from electors.
Yeah.
Is that the term?
I think it's my memory.
So maybe we can.
Matter. Yep.
Okay, we'll give it to Kristen to check on the language.
Thank you.
Okay. Section 24 deals with I'm not sure about the policy element of this, other than to codify the fact that in most of our language, mayor and president of the council are synonymous. Looking for the sentiment of council on whether to codify that.
No,
Yeah.
that is not the issue.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is the issue of should the mayor be elected at large by the community with the same powers as currently identified, or should it continue as is? No, this says, I want to be clear out of the gate. None of this is about changing the duties or powers of the mayor. That was not a discussion at all there was reinforcement and unanimous support for a home rule council manager form of government. The question here was, we currently, as you all know, you elect your mayor from within, and the question was, should that action occur by the vote of the people as opposed to the 7 of you? Again, no change in duties, no change in responsibilities, just shifting that responsibility, which has election ramifications in terms of the staggering and the things you were talking about. But I'm going to say it again, no change in duties, because I think that's where we got crosswise last time. This is about saying, should 42,000 people decide who the mayor is, or should the 7 of you?
I didn't read this section as saying that.
It doesn't say that.
Change to citizen-elected mayor with same duties as current council was the minority recommendation, and there were several CRC members who believed that, and the majority said leave as is.
Okay.
So what you're seeing is no change to this, but the policy question for you is, would you like to see a change to this? And if so, we would bring back language that would provide for a citizen-elected mayor. It's not here because the Charter Review Committee didn't want to pursue it, but it was certainly a lengthy discussion we had.
On multiple days.
Question, so
No, I'm sorry, Randy. What you guys, oh, no, I'm sorry, you go ahead.
I was actually asking about the mechanics of, so the implications are, so if there were to be an at-large mayor, then would we have to shuffle? I mean, we have a mayor right now who's from a district. We had our previous mayor who was from a district. So what's the mechanics that accommodate that change?
You would probably take, I mean, just from a simplistic
Right,
statement,
as an
you would
example.
take one of the at-larges and you would shift that to a mayor. And you've got some cleanup at the moment of if somebody were in a district who did it. But theoretically, you'd have 4 district reps, you'd have 2 at-larges, and you'd have a mayor.
I'm okay with leave as is.
And
Well, you know what I think.
There was a lot of discussion about this at CRC.
I think it
so.
should go to a vote of the people. I think that the citizens of the community should have a vote in who their mayor is. The mayor is the face of the community in a number of places. Whether we like it or not, the term mayor connotates a leadership role to a lot of people. It also is very much a connotation that they were elected by the community. And I think that the citizens have a right to elect their mayor. And I think that, again, you know, the council electing the mayor, I don't think it's always the healthiest election. And I think that there's a lot of reasons why it's something that we should not be left in charge of. So I completely support putting this to the voters and ask the voters if they'd like to elect their mayor. That's what we're doing. We're not making it happen. We're putting it to the voters and saying, would you like to elect your mayor? They may say no. You guys keep doing it.
Bruce?
Just technically, how would we put that on the ballot then? Would we put all the revisions of the charter as one measure, or would we break them up?
We'll have that discussion at the end. That's what I was saying earlier.
Because that goes to this. That, some of these are technical housekeeping kinds of things that require a vote of the people to modify the charter, period. Something that changes the way we do business as a community from the way we've done it 50 years raises to another level, and there may be something else in here that does. And I would hate to have them,
and
again, a significant issue buried in.
No, you would not, and that's why we want to get through these conversations, because the policy question before you is, what do you want to do from this? How you package that and identifying those very key issues, because it gets to single subject rules and it gets to other things. I'm just going to push back on you because we don't want you guys focused on how do you package this right now.
But
we want you focused on the policy question of what Debbie raised, which is, do you want to have the general public? This particular one would probably be its own question out there, but you guys have to decide, do you want to have it be a question? And we provided, and we can, as was said earlier, we provided a lot of information to CRC about what other communities did, and my recollection was, and I think we actually did to the council, and it's about a 50-50 split on.
I know, I think it's about 20% elect, council-elect.
Council-elect, okay. I was
it's low.
thinking it was closer, but I just think it's important that you guys, that your question and your concern is absolutely valid. How do we package this at the end of the day? But we need to have the totality of what you want in order to come back and say, okay, these can be packaged from a technical, one administrative, but even administrative changes may require multiple ballots. And we just want to keep you out of the weeds, if you will, right now, not thinking about the political side of it, thinking about.
Well, it's not the political side. It's the difference of just a technical clarity change in charter to a significant change in the way we do business. And I think it does matter if I was to say, yes, I support this, am I supporting it to be thrown in the mix? Or am
Bruce,
I saying yes, that I support it?
We're not talking about what goes in the mix. That's every one of the things. Every one of the ones that we have asked you today will probably be its own question.
Okay.
Because that's why the administrative ones, the ones that you kind of would lump together, we're not asking you because they're identified in here as technical cleanup, Tabor supersedes, those kind of things. But even those will need to go through the attorney's office to say, how can you package it based on single subject? The policy ones, these 13 or 12 that we've pulled out, are those big ones that we think warrant a conversation with the council and probably individual policy questions. So I just don't want you assuming that because it seems like a minuscule question or a big question. These are the ones that we believe require good conversation, and we'll have to have dialogue with the community because they're all an issue there's a lot of people out there who may not want the election commission to only speak up in circumstances of recalls.
Bruce, to cut to the chase, I agree with you. If we get to that, this ought to be a separate issue, period. Yeah. Let's move on.
Yeah. I'm just trying to keep you guys out of that so that we don't.
Let's wrap up and go.
Okay. Let's do it.
So we didn't all get to speak yet?
Oh,
and Bruce had his finger up first.
Yeah, sure. Were you?
Go ahead and I'll wait.
When, in the communities that are more or less our size, so excluding Denton, when they direct elect, is it generally speaking strong mayor or is it city manager?
It's always council manager, form of government. There are only two. So bear with me, Jerry.
Keep it short.
For some reason, this continues to be an issue. There are only 2 communities in the state of Colorado that operate with a strong mayor form of government, Colorado Springs and the city and county of Denver. Every other municipality in the state of Colorado operates under a council manager form of government. Within that structure, there is a variety of different authorities that have been granted through the charter or through ordinances to the mayor of that community. Some they can, as the mayor pointed out, they can waive parking tickets or traffic tickets or whatever. But they're all a weak mayor form of government requiring the council. The question is about who picks that position. And part of the debate, I think historically, if I can go back to Debbie's early one, is there is a responsibility that the mayor has, and either one of these guys can speak to it, that is outside the boundaries of Littleton, where a direct
Sounds like you're trying to sell it. I'd like to hear from
No. I'm trying. Well, then Debbie can say it. I'm just trying to.
She's had her bit. They haven't had their chance, but you're going on and on. I want to hear from council members.
Okay.
You're selling the deal.
I'm
Explaining it.
We continue to have a misunderstanding of what this is, and I'm trying to clarify what this is. There was lack of clarity from Councilmember Stallman about what this is.
Yeah. I would probably state it very simply. One is it doesn't change the power of the position. It changes the source of the election. Right. Do you have a direct election of the citizens for mayor, or do you have an election from the body? And it's about 60-40 is the current split in the state on how that occurs, at least based on the last, everyone changes. So.
I wouldn't have a problem, I think, at some level asking the citizens if this is something they want.
Okay. Peggy?
So I think the citizens have done a really good job with elections in the past. I think having a directly elected mayor, at least too often it seems to me, a mayor brings an agenda. In our case, would be 7 council people have diverse issues they bring, and the majority forms its agenda. And in the worst, and sometimes not even middle of the road kinds of things, you have these 2 going at each other in ways that I don't see as helpful. I like the idea of a whole council having its agenda and a president who's called mayor, who's helping facilitate that in the local community and in the region and elsewhere. That's what I like. I think it has worked really, really well here. The problems we've had in the electing of a president, I think, can be resolved if we just take whoever's doing the electing the next time, takes time to deal with those. We've just had a bad experience, I think, with the feelings that have gotten hurt. And that doesn't have to happen, I think.
Did you want to comment?
I don't have a problem with asking the people what they want.
I think that the vast majority of the time council is elected to make difficult decisions, to make informed decisions, to make educated decisions. We all know that we spend a tremendous amount of time reviewing documents and other sections of our packet before we pontificate about very complicated things. And in some cases, the ordinary citizen, I think, is too busy just sort of running his or her life or doing homework with the kids or whatever to be asked to weigh in on that. But to me, I think this is a much more fundamental decision, and one that perhaps I would hope that the average person would do a little homework, but it's certainly not a very highly technical decision. So I would be supportive of sending maybe not a lot of things, but this thing in particular to the people to decide.
On this, it's one where I can actually make arguments on both sides. So I think taking it to the electorate is probably an okay thing. So, oh yeah,
I say leave as is. Littleton is, 42,000, 43,000. It operates this way throughout the state. Other jurisdictions may do it differently, but this does work for Littleton. And I can see having an election for a mayor will change the dynamic of how a council does work together, period.
Yeah. And
it also may also change the way we have to structure things. We may end up having to add council people. We may have to add different positions. I have, in the last couple of months, I have talked to more people who I haven't known about different issues about Littleton. Lots of people. This is not an issue. This is definitely not one of the issues that they care about. It works well for Littleton as it is, and I don't see why we want to keep making things or stirring things up to change it. So I'm okay with leaving it as it is.
It's one of those where I think it works very much for Littleton. So I'm not going to say how I might campaign on this or push on this, but there's already 4 folks that have kind of said that direction. Deb?
So I noticed on here they crossed out president of the council and put mayor. Are we changing president of the council to mayor throughout the charter?
That was a unanimous recommendation by the commission.
Yeah,
So from now on, we will not have a president or a president pro tem. We will have a mayor and a mayor pro tem.
Well,
You have to go to the, you have to vote,
okay,
yes.
so yes,
but
if they vote for that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's actually a separate issue than the one that's been
But you're
raised.
correct.
Right, no, yeah, I split the issue.
Yes.
Okay.
That was for,
Well, which means and so with this one, packaging up what are the implications is probably going to be some additional discussion because there's options on, as Jerry would pointed out, is there would be implication on length of terms, otherwise on council and how that works out.
So where are we on this one?
There were 4.5 to 2.5.
To do what? To do what?
Take it to the people.
Okay.
Okay, council, we've now gone past an hour. We still have essentially 6 additional items, so we made it through half the list of 12.
I bet we can get there.
Sentiment to go on or sentiment to break and take up later?
Go on.
Yeah. Go
Go.
on.
Okay. Next up is Section 27, which has a question on what would be the local media, but this has to deal with notice of meeting.
actually, it's a code of conduct.
Oh, okay.
So the majority had suggested, and just for clarity again, it's not in there because the majority said leave as is, don't have a code of conduct, but there was a minority suggestion to add a council code of conduct governing attendance and the conduct at meetings, which I believe is unrelated to the agenda item that had been pulled this evening, just for clarification.
Okay. Anyone have an interest in having that being included?
No.
I mean, that's really for the council to pretty much set its own rules, and that's where we've contained it before. So, okay. Moving on,
But
section.
there is the city code of conduct that also refers to us. I mean, we have our own code, but there's the city one too.
Right.
And state statute.
Yes. There's several reference points that we have. Okay.
That's right.
Thank you on that. Section 28 has to deal with vacancies, and I better turn it to comments before I speak too early.
Before you speak too early?
Yeah, meaning that it may not just be the words in front of us. It may be what's missing, which I've had happen twice now.
You're correct. You're correct in this one.
Do you want to take this one, Michael? Or?
No, you can.
Okay.
I'm
So,
getting in enough trouble.
That's right. We need a timer.
so the Charter Review Committee, what they were struggling with here is whether the council should, be able to come together and fill the vacancy as opposed to having it default, after 30 days, they'll go ahead and schedule a special election. And so I think it was sort of forcing the hand of council to work together to fill the vacancy. Is that your recollection,
That is correct.
Michael?
Yep. Yeah, because the concern was what would happen if the 30 days went by and the council could not agree on an appointee.
Appointee, yeah.
So how does the current appointee system work? Is it,
You got to get 4 votes.
Exactly.
well, okay, but is it,
4 out of 2, 4 out of 6.
okay, so then is it similar to applying as,
Like a
okay,
board.
do you have to get 50 signatures like we were talking about before?
No,
it's-
Is it like applying to a board or commission?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, you know-
And then you come in and you interview in front of council?
Yeah, you and I did it in '07, and it was, we had 7 people interview, and they took, I don't know, 3 or 4 votes till they finally could get 4 to settle on.
Okay.
It's happened though twice that I can think of in the last 20 years about, something like that.
And it was a concern. Obviously, the majority did not support adding the language in, but there was some folks who were just concerned that if you had a council who could not reach an agreement, you could sit with a vacancy. And so adding in the language saying that the clerk will schedule a special election was kind of the hammer to get council to come together and reach an agreement. So the question is where you think whether that would occur.
So it's not doing anything to change the way that the appointed thing.
Correct.
My question, and I probably could read it in the charter where it says it, but what's the length of time that's permissible from the vacancy to the, they have 30
Till
days.
the appointment?
Yeah.
So right now, it provides that, that you're supposed to appoint within 30 days, but then it's sort of silent as to what happens next. And so that's why the clerk had suggested when we went into the committee process that we add in that within 30 days, if you don't decide, she's going to schedule a special election. And the Charter Review Committee considered that suggestion and took it out, saying, no, we want to require that the council come to a decision in 30 days, and we don't want to let them just wait and let it go to an election. I will say that I think the committee noted that this is very rare. You haven't had to deal with this, and the chance that this will come up is possible, but slim.
It's come up twice in the last 20 years.
Yeah.
So the question is do we want to have a ticking clock for council? And I'm going to start off with my first piece, which is I think 30 days is too little of a time frame. I know that on special district boards, they're given 60 days, and then it actually moves to the county commissioners. So I would much rather see a 60-day window rather than a 30-day window, just recognizing how quickly the clock goes and availability of folks for say, even interviews. I mean, roughly between applicant and our interviews for commissions, it's almost 60 days. So I would rather see a 60-day window if we're going to consider it. But
I would agree because we have to advertise the position, and then we also have, in a regular election, we have kind of a 101, a kind of an introductory what it means to be, and I think it would give 60 days would give us time to kind of do that too. As we were talking earlier about the training and that type of thing, and to come in and because the reality is, if you are running for an election, you've got 90 to 120 days prior to the election to be working on all of that. So,
and so the option is to have no time limit.
Right.
Or have a time limit. And I was just arguing if we're going to have a time limit, I wouldn't use 30, I'd use 60.
I agree on 60.
30 is fine. For the two that they've done in the past, they've had quality candidates come forward almost immediately to express interest. It hasn't been a problem for council to appoint somebody. They get the people before them, and they select somebody so that district has a representative. 30 days is good.
Yep. And can I comment too? I like the 30 days, but something is coming to mind here. I mean, if we went for longer, you get so close to an upcoming election, you wouldn't do this within the the election season, but potentially the way this is worded, you could appoint somebody during an election season when otherwise they could just be elected to fill a remainder of a term.
Correct.
And the term might actually be for 2 more years following when there would be an opportunity to actually have the citizens elect to fill a vacancy.
It would still only be for 2 years, though.
Yeah, but why not give the citizens a chance to elect if it's that long? I mean, if it gets close to an actual election period. But I have another question with this, and it's a little different. How does one determine incapacity?
Health issues, can't attend the meetings.
Is there a legal?
I'll have to research that. I don't know. I mean, it's sort of one of those, you know it when you see it. I'm sure there is a legal definition, but I don't know it off the top of my head. But generally it is that you are, you have serious health issues and you cannot serve as a council member.
But I'm sort of wondering, does the person say, I'm incapacitated? I did some research on it today, and it looked to me like it's a fairly legal parameter for it. You can't function rationally or whatever. So I really would appreciate maybe getting some insight before we move totally forward with this.
You have all of those physical and personal issues, but also if someone is elected to another office in the state, you can only hold one elected office in the state.
That's
Therefore,
not incapacitated.
Or they get put in jail. That happened.
Oh, yeah. So you'll have.
They weren't available?
Yep.
So you have some other issues.
I think I tend to agree with Councilmember Valdez. I think the 30 days, when we did this in 07, council quickly got together to figure it out. I don't really think the need exists for a hammer to do a special election. And I also think, I think it's council's discretion as to how they want to do that. The overriding issue is you want the citizens represented, and you want to have 7 because it's better from a voting perspective. If you were going to appoint somebody in September and the election were in November, I could see waiting. But I mean, even when we did it, it was February. So the term was 7 months, and then then there was another election. But somebody was there. I was there for 7 months, kind of thing. So I would just do the 30 days. Let council decide what they want to do in 30 days, and let them make the call.
I'm comfortable with 30 days.
45 days.
I'm comfortable with 45 days.
There you go.
That's good, but
Bruce, 45?
I don't want to go 60. I certainly don't want to go 60.
I'm good with 30. I'm standing on 30.
I think I think both are preferable over having a special election, going all the time and expense and the administrative thing. I guess I'm, again, a little bit ambivalent because I think it should be done in 30 days, but I think if you say certainly no less or no more than 60 days and sort of goose the council to get going, if they can get it done in 30 days, that's great. I'm concerned about what happens if one of the circumstances that Councilmember Brinkman described even though it hasn't happened in 20 years, if it did, this gives council a little latitude to do it right. So I guess I'll default to 60.
I would like to see 60 days, not looking to necessarily wait that period of time, but before triggering a special election, I'd like to give the council a chance to get it done. It's not without precedent elsewhere as far as a time frame, and I will tell you, every time that I'm aware of, a group has gotten way ahead of the game, but to have it hanging over the head, the time frame, so you don't want to actually wait to the end anyway. I don't know what direction you take from that. But what we were getting is to put a time limit on it. So
I do like this, the clerk doing the special election if that time
Right.
frame, if we have it.
yeah, I think we were all with
You
that.
okay on
but
that?
We're all with that.
You,
Outside
Bruce
30
was
days?
not okay with that.
I think council's discretion. I think, my sense is that's a really important issue, and to basically assume council wouldn't honor that responsibility, I don't know, putting an artificial deadline on it to me doesn't seem important.
Okay, so we had from unlimited, we have a couple of 30s and three 60s.
Well, can we
I
break
was
it?
at 30 originally, I stayed with 30. I was willing to go up to 45, but I'm really.
We were,
If we say 60 days, it's going to take 50 days. I mean, that's just what's going to happen. 30 days
45, it takes
has always been met, and I just don't see that as an issue. So I'm staying with 30.
30, 30, 60, 60, 30.
2 30s equal to
Like,
60.
I think that was more than 7.
Yes.
So what was our, so what are we
That's how we
doing?
get-
What are we doing?
That's how we get the
what are we doing?
votes.
I think we put it in as 30, even
All right,
though I would like
so-
to see 60s.
All right, so the question, though, was about if the vacancy is not filled. So the committee recommended that you not add that language, but I heard the mayor say that there was support for the hammer if council doesn't take action, and so I'm not clear on that. Does council want to ask the voters if the vacancy is not filled in 30 days, the clerk will schedule a
See,
special
now I
election?
agree with Mr. Stallman on this, which is if we're going to say 30, I'd say take the hammer off.
It's happened twice in 20 years, and it's been handled both times.
Easily.
Okay,
I'm good.
so
Good.
leave all as is.
Okay.
And then,
Okay.
so just, this one is, probably I can ask later, but since this is in here in print, in the middle of this item is not a whole sentence, and I think it's got to do with where the red and the strikeout ended wrong, I think. But if you all read through that whole thing, see if
Got
you
it.
see a sentence.
On that. So it's take a look at the language to make sure it's in English.
Well, this provision, you've recommended no changes, so whatever is in there will stay in there, and I'm assuming the way it's drafted is grammatically correct. We won't be bringing forward a charter amendment on this section because you've directed that there's no interest in that, so.
So no changes at all in there, okay.
Thank you.
Which takes us on to big jump ahead to section 54, which deals with the appointment of the city attorney.
I'll start in here. There was discussion regarding the term, the revised, I'm just going to read it, revised 2 years of legal experience to 5 years as a more appropriate level of experience given what we're doing right now. So currently it's 2 years, and there was a recommendation to put in 5 years, and then ultimately the committee said that you should just strike that and let the council pick based upon who they determine is appropriate in whatever the job description you describe, and that should not be in the charter. So
Great.
ultimately, the recommendation was to clean it up and remove the majority of language.
Okay. Is
I agree
anyone
with
opposed
the-
to cleaning it up?
Committee.
Go ahead. Okay. Next is, now there's a reference in there to section 55, which talks about all attorneys who reside or maintain offices in the city shall be given first consideration for appointment. I'm presuming that was something to be added, and we're not adding that, correct?
That
No,
that is
was-
currently in
that
the
was
charter.
Existing language, and they recommended removal.
Okay, so we're going forward with that. Removal, right?
Because I
Cleaning it
think
up.
that's the kind of thing that could be in the job description or something like that, because it's not mandating that they're here.
Okay, got that. Just wanted to be sure. Okay, next is section 57.
Correct. And this was to address what I think most of the council members on this currently seated have seen in terms of discussions between the council and the attorney about who hires the special counsel. So this language is intended to clean that up. And so aside from the and mayor there, but clarify that the city attorney in consultation with the city manager and mayor may also employ other counsel whose compensation shall be, et cetera, et cetera. So it's just clarifying language around who and how special counsel is chosen, which, as you're aware, has been a topic of discussion over the years.
Does anyone have problems with what's been suggested as a cleanup for that?
Can you clarify what's suggested?
The capital letters in 57, city attorney, in consultation with the city manager and mayor.
And part of that is a budget consideration from the city.
So the mayor will be mayor whether the citizens elect the mayor or not, right?
Yeah, that was a global change, as Debbie pointed out earlier.
If we're okay with that, section 59.
Kristen, you want to take this one from some of the headaches you've had?
Sure. So let me gather my thoughts. So this has to do with sort of taking out restrictions in the charter about what needs to be brought to you, and instead revising so that, contracts of a certain size or dollar amount could be handled by the city manager. And the Charter Review Committee's recommendation was that we leave it to the discretion of the council to set those limits by ordinance instead of, setting those hard numbers in the charter.
So their rationale, just to drill down a little bit, was remove the language that struck through, and then in that action, the council would then, through ordinances, Kristen said, set the limits as you do in many other areas for administrative action, and in this case, be signed by the mayor at whatever levels the council authorizes.
This would come with that list of annual items that we would have and that would be considered at that point in time.
It would be a place like that.
So to put that with it, and would be that would be the part that I would suggest.
Easy to do.
So as we're dealing with all the posting issues and things of that nature, we can hit that.
And I think one of the reasons for this was, again, to get into longevity of language and moving that authority to the council to make determinations what needs to be signed by whom and under what circumstances that authority lies with city manager, mayor, et cetera.
Anyone opposed to that? Going forward? Okay.
Well,
Yes, Bruce.
Well, I guess I'm not quite sure if I'm reading the actual text. You sort of, okay, so you want to take contracts out because that's what's going to be covered in the ordinance?
Correct.
As opposed to saying if you leave contracts in instead of saying contracts of a certain size. Is that what?
Yeah.
That's where.
So each council can determine
Okay, all right.
at their discretion. Yep.
Okay, I'm fine. Well, I'm okay with it.
Thank you for that clarification.
I could tell there was a question on the table.
Next up, this is another one, or that was one of those, which is it's not what is said, it's what's not said. So, I'm learning. So into section 60, which deals with things like water rights and open space and what can or can't be used or sold by the city or contracts related thereto, terminated or such.
So there was a lot of conversation on this, which I would say was predicated by one member related to the sale of the water rights to the city and county of Denver. And the concern was that was a massive shift of value that a council made a decision about, and there was discussion that that type of sale of that level of asset should go to the voters of Littleton to decide as opposed to the council making that choice. So as we struggled with how to articulate what that was, because that has been done, and so you can't point back at that one thing and say, okay, in that exact circumstance, because we're not going to run into that. So the one area that we did find is the or open space purposes. Just for clarity, we think that that one makes a lot of sense to add open space. So lands granted to, purchased, acquired by city use, or used by the city for park or open space purposes shall not be sold without a vote. So I think that's one component of it. And then if you look at the majority recommendation, we never really did come up with any really good language dealing with valuable, tangible, or intangible assets, but we landed with the language that you see before you, which is really around those water rights again. But there was a lot of concern about massive assets that the city may hold in some circumstance in the future, and how is the decision made for the sale of that asset, which could be tangible, it could be intangible, depending upon the future. And so it was a fairly lengthy discussion about how you articulate that on words when there's no, we didn't want to say public property or public buildings, because it may, just as an example, we don't want to put a restriction on the sale of the public works facility because it may make sense. That's more of an operational component where you would want to sell that piece of property, buy another piece of property more central within the city, and then you change your operational snowplow and maintenance type. So that's something that I think the committee very clearly wanted to keep within the purview of the council. But a sale of something of a magnitude of water rights, which people had felt very strongly, was in perpetuity, and that was sold for X dollars, and there were frustration that that was not something that went to the voters. Is there, Kristen?
Yeah, you captured it there, and there was a lot of struggle about sort of how to, word that this idea of what those assets would be, and I think they finally just landed on really they cared about the water rights, but I think also there was discussion about naming rights. There are some, the museum, this building, and whether those should be included in that. But ultimately, the Charter Review Committee came down to really it's about the water rights.
Not that there wasn't passion about the others, but hard to pull out one without naming things individually.
Yeah.
Deb first.
I just have a quick question. Open space, that's already covered on state, right? So putting it in here as a redundancy, we're okay with that? I mean...
Well, I don't know that it's covered. I mean, in theory, you could, and Kristen, correct me if I'm wrong, you could sell a piece of open space, reimburse it with...
Reimburse.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, sorry.
Yes, so you could sell a piece of open space right now that was purchased by the city's open space fund.
Didn't Inglewood just have an election item on that? They did. Yeah. It went to the citizens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In Littleton, we would have to do a trade. We'd have to provide other open space, and that would be the only way that we could actually do it.
Well, it depends upon how it was purchased. So if you're doing it with a grant dollars where there's conditions placed on it, there's additional requirements there. But if we had gone out just on our own and used our open space money for it, you can currently sell that open space. Now, politically, it might not make sense, but...
I thought all open space had to go back to a vote of the public.
No, this is your current restriction of sale of land right now.
Okay.
If you lose the words or open space, lands granted to, purchased, acquired by the city for use, or used by the city for park purposes. And so it was clarifying language because a park and an open space have different definitions in a lot of communities. And again, a lot of what we do is joint grant and all that, so it has, or you put conditions on the property, conservation easement, thank you. But again, this was concerned that a council could sell that piece of property that it's very passionate to people.
And just one more quick question. So water rights, what do we have at this point? I mean, we have a contract with Denver Water.
We have the aquifer water.
Okay. And that's the only water right we have?
Basically. I mean, there's a lot of miscellaneous little things, but I think the aquifer, if I remember, was the example of...
City ditch.
Yeah, I mean, we've got, if you remember...
City ditch, but the water's Inglewood's, right?
Well, yeah, your call on it is way junior to a lot of others.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, if you remember what our water attorneys put together, there's actually a multitude
Oh, yeah, I remember every word.
There's a lot of little bits in there, but the aquifer is the big one. And that was, again, it was a concern that, hey, the community should have a vote if
That we
those
would
were
sell
contemplated.
the aquifer?
Rights just for something.
Or
There
if
was
we-
frustration that the water rights were sold from Denver, or
Well, that's
sold
what-
to Denver.
Well, and conceivably, we've considered purchasing water rights
Right.
with regard to reallocation and trying to protect the river as it runs through the city. So what we have in our current inventory isn't necessarily what we might have in our future inventory if we ever get to that. Bruce?
Yeah, I would not be in favor of this. And the issue of the water rights and the thing with Denver Water is a decent example, because what happened was, the outcome aside, there was extensive amount of investigation, negotiation, economic analysis, all sorts of things that were done in-house. And there was a lot of deliberation and consideration of the alternatives of what to do in that instance. You know, you either believe in elected representative government or you don't. And, you know, we can there's been questions, you know, let's send marijuana to the voters, kind of stuff. It's every time there's a tough issue, it's, well, why don't we just send it to the voters?
Kind of like the mayor issue.
Huh?
Kind of like the mayor.
But potentially, I mean, you could make that point, I guess. But broadly speaking, I think if you're going to run for city council and you're going to get elected, and you're going to dump the tough ones back to the voters, then, you know, what are we going to do? Just sit up here and pass resolutions and pass the budget and so forth and so on? I mean, I just think that you know, we're equipped to dig into these issues in depth and give them extensive deliberation and consideration and make an informed decision. And I'm just not sure that asking the citizens broadly to weigh in on the technicalities of a lot of those kinds of issues is how we want the system designed.
Mayor. I think, along with what you're saying, citizens have an opportunity to speak at council meetings when those kinds of issues come up.
And to vote.
Right? Yeah.
Randy?
Councilman Stallman, I categorically agree with you. I specifically, 20 minutes ago, carved out the situation we were talking about, Mayor, as being one, in my sole and subjective opinion, was one that did not require the in-depth study and analysis of perhaps hundreds of pages of documents and reports from consultants and stuff. And so I absolutely agree with you that the majority of the things that we need to decide shouldn't have to be decided by the elected body. That's why we're here. The mayoral exception, I think I noted to the council, was, in my opinion, an exception.
Yep.
I agree with Councilmember Stallman, too. I think that this one troubles me a little bit because it feels a little bit like a reprimand after the fact. When I know that there was a controversy a bit about that decision. I remember very clearly being in the middle of that and dealing with that for close to a year, and it was a difficult, challenging decision for the council, because it didn't just involve Littleton. It involved water concerns, issues, needs for a large portion of the Front Range. We have to work together with the folks who are sharing the same watershed, and some of the ideas that come before us and came before us on that were a way to make the best use of what could be done at the time and how things worked out. It was not an easy decision, but and people don't have to like the decision. It says here, recommend protecting very valuable, tangible, and intangible assets. As far as I'm concerned, that is what when we take this job and we run for this job and we get elected and we sit up there and start voting, that is part of our DNA of the job. That is a responsibility we have. You don't like the vote, then you have another vote when you come around. So I think that I would like to see open space in there.
I'm going to put it out to the table of everything except for adding the open space as a restricted sale component. Stay as is, so not going any further than that. Is anyone opposed to that?
I'm okay with doing the recommendation.
I'm not sure what you said.
Yeah, me neither.
In other words, we put in the language
English
open.
this time.
We put in the language open space, but the part
Other
which
red
we did
goes
with-
in.
oh, the
Okay.
other red
Yeah.
goes.
I'm good.
Good,
Okay, Randy's good. Jerry's not.
good.
I think it's a difference that we really don't need. We have park already in there. I think open space could be interpreted as park. I don't know why we need it.
I'll go with it, but I don't know that we need open space either, but
Yeah, I was willing to. I'm taking it as a piece that we can clarify and offer up. So, okay. Those were the items I had.
So what was the result? What's the result?
Open space and skip the rest of the red.
So not the recommendation.
Yes.
I have just
So I have a question, going back to the having the citizens vote on whether they want to elect a mayor.
Mm-hmm.
Will we not, since we don't know for sure when this is going to go to a vote, and even if we did know right now, do we not also have to have something in there that if this passes or whatever, it goes into effect at a certain
There's
time?
absolutely, all those things have to be packaged up
No,
and
I
how it
just-
gets presented. Just as the original charter had when an election occurred and what the implications were in any transition, it's going to have to get fleshed out at that level. Yes. Bruce?
A couple times we've talked about a vote of the people. I've heard different amounts as to what the cost to the city is for a vote of the people.
Yeah.
Can we get some clarification what that is, just so we can have discussions with the public about that?
Good
Great
idea.
question.
That's a request. So, and, it certainly matters if it's decided to do any kind of special election or pair it with a special election or put it with our general council election next fall. So those are all options.
And then since we're all here, who do I talk to give the little corrections? Which, you? Okay.
And then, council, just a quick note. Our tentative agenda, so I use the word tentative, is very operative on this. For next Tuesday has 8 consent agenda items, of which I expect at least one will get pulled because it has to do with a business improvement district. And 2 resolutions. And so just to kind of give you a heads up, that's what the tentative agenda has on it. And as always, stay tuned because the agenda may or may not change as we go through the period of time. So that's why I use
And you will have 5 members of council there. 2 members will not be there. Randy and I won't be there.
We'll be in Austin.
Okay. I'm not leaving till the morning, so.
I'm there.
Okay. You're going to be here next
Yeah,
Tuesday?
you'll have 5.
We'll have 5. So.
And then Thursday, we have the meeting.
And Thursday, there's a breakfast with the South Suburban Board as well, so in the room here. With all of that. And with that, we're adjourned. Please get home safely and hopefully warmly.
All right.